get in and get settled in, get all of our technology where we want it to be, all of those really great things. So my name is Kiah Morris, and I am the Movement Politics Director for Rights and Democracy of Vermont. So Rights and Democracy of itself is a bi-state grassroots organization and collective of individuals from all walks of life across Vermont and New Hampshire who are dedicated to creating healthy, just, and equitable societies and democracies. Rights and Democracy covers both Vermont and New Hampshire, and it is a member-based organization, and there are chapters throughout each state that anyone can get plugged into. Now, the reason why we're here today is what I experienced in my journey. If you aren't familiar, I served within the Vermont State Legislature from 2014 through 2018. And in that experience, there's a million stories that can be told. But one of the things I noticed very clearly that there's an urgent need to have elected leaders whose experiences reflect that of our most vulnerable and marginalized. So my role is centered in the commitment to building that grassroots base of those individuals to come from the bottom up and to support Vermonters in moving from protest to power and starting to win elected seats. But we know that this work is going to require for all hands to be on deck and for us to have voices that are continually marginalized, pushed out of, or not invited into these spaces of power. What created this kind of concept of let's pull some folks together to talk about their experiences as elected individuals that are coming from a variety of different identities in this time of rampant hate crimes is that my own experience was pretty dramatic. It's complicated and it's heartbreaking and it's inspiring all at the same time. And really, in my experience, coming really head on with what it means to be dealing with online harassment, to be dealing with harassment in real life, to be dealing with stalking, challenges, threats to your life, all of these sorts of components that are a part of a world that we've become used to identifying as saying these are trolls. This is activities coming from fascist organizations, and a whole variety of spectrums of individuals who are interfacing with our public and our private selves in ways that carry some extra weight sometimes these days, because there's easier access to our elected officials, more so than we've ever had before, and the ability to be anonymous behind one's actions are also very huge. And so what was happening was that I was getting individuals, people of color, folks from the LGBTQIA community, folks from various religious identities who say, I want to run for office, but I'm worried about what this is going to mean. I'm worried about my safety, and I'd like to know more. And so that, to me, is a really important touch point to show that there are individuals who want to run and who want to step into this work, who are willing to place their necks out on the line and step into the light, who have deep concerns about their own safety and about what that means for themselves, their spiritual selves, their families, and their communities at large that they're representing, should those attacks come their way. And that might be the piece that keeps someone, a qualified candidate, from stepping forward. And we can't have that. We cannot have that in this moment of urgency. So we're very excited to be able to bring together this collective of folks. And it's really, we're standing on the shoulders of the Rights and Democracy movement, as well as that of our own cultures and histories and backgrounds. And so our members that are a part of this process, that are supporting Rights and Democracy, they're young and old. They're families, they're single people, they're retirees, they're working people who come from communities from all over. And together we create change through our grassroots organizing, our educating and mobilizing around the issues that are affecting our communities. Really looking at recruiting and training candidates and trying to change the narrative around who gets to make policy decisions and how we engage in that process. So today we have some amazing folks with us, and we're going to have an opportunity to ask some questions, hear some stories, and also to learn some practical tips and tools on ways that you yourself as an individual, as a potential candidate, can think a little bit differently about what this new world looks like and feels like, and how to move through that with a greater measures of safety and to be able to protect yourself and your family in different ways. So throughout this call, this is a moderated event. We do have our chat window and you're welcome to put in comments. We will be collecting questions if there are questions that came through previously, and we will get back to you in further communications if we don't answer those questions during this call. Everyone is going to be muted, and so that will just also be to keep things clear so that we can make sure we have an excellent experience for everyone. So this is also being recorded, just so that you'll know, and it will be available on both our YouTube and our Facebook pages after the event has completed. So now to welcome in our fantastic guests. I'm very excited. So to begin, we have on our fantastic roster today, we have City Councilman Ali Deng, who was elected to the Burlington City Council in 2017 and has served ever since. And through all of his work that he's done with Parent University, which is a program within the Burlington School District, he helps parents, many of whom are new Americans, get involved in their children's education. He's voices in changing and doing educational reform. He's on the board of the Champlain Valley Office of Economic Opportunity, a leader with Rights and Democracy, and on the Vermont Council of World Affairs. We are also excited to have Representative Diana Gonzalez of Winooski. She holds degrees from Western Washington University and the School for International Training out of Brattleboro, Vermont. Diana is pursuing her doctorate in education, leadership, and policy at the University of Vermont and runs an independent consulting business, Grounds for Discourse. Previously, she worked in public health, specifically addressing substance abuse prevention in higher education. And in 2014, she was elected into the Vermont House of Representatives, the first Latinx in state history. She currently serves as the director for the leadership programs for the Equality Federation. Representative Emily Kornheiser has received her BA in sociology from Marlborough College and attended the master's program in community development from Applied Economics at the University of Vermont. She served overseas promoting democracy and supporting small business development and has held numerous positions at community-based organizations throughout the state. Emily is currently the Director of Workforce Development at Youth Services in Brattleboro, where she designs and supervises programs that put connection at the center of skills building and economic justice. She was elected to the legislature in 2018. We also have with us today Rutland City Alderwoman Lisa Ryan, who attended Rutland City High School and then Temple University, where she earned a bachelor's degree in psychology. She holds a master's degree in mediation and applied conflict studies from Champlain College as well. She is the director of the Rutland County Community Justice Center through Brock Community Action in southwestern Vermont, where she oversees 3 programs helping recently released offenders re-enter their community. She has volunteered as panel members on the restorative justice boards in her community and as an organization, started an organization, COSA, which focuses on reintegrating offenders into our communities, as well as teaching mediation at the Rutland Jail itself. She's a board member of the Chaffee Arts Center, a member of Project Vision in Rutland, and vice president of the Rutland NAACP chapter. We also have with us, who will be wrapping up this fantastic time period, Jessica Robinson, who is the founder and CEO of Pure Point International, a holistic boutique security firm, which is the #1 security company for women-owned and women-led businesses globally. Jessica initially majored in law enforcement and computer sciences and eventually received her master's in public and international affairs. Pure Point International helps CEOs prevent data breaches by bridging the gap between the physical and cybersecurity. And with their unique business model and launch of their new trainings, Safe Spaces organizational and leadership training, PurePoint was recently awarded the JCI Philippines New York Icon Award for International Affairs and Women's Security. And she's also the co-author of a #1 best-selling book, Mission Impossible. So we got a powerhouse roster who have some amazing stories to tell and some really key lessons that I think that we will all really gather from. So thank you so much for agreeing to be on this call today in the evening. Very much grateful to you all. So the way that we're going to begin this is we're going to give an opportunity for our panelists to kind of talk us through some of their journey and learn a little bit more about how came to this, what that was like, what it means to stand up within your own identity, and when you've received challenges to that, either direct threats or ways of really challenged what we're talking about for racial and ethnic minorities who are stepping into the political realm. So to begin first, I would love to welcome Burlington City Councilman Ali Deng. Hello, Ali.
I'm muted. Yes, I'm back here. How are you? Thank you so much for doing this and for having me. And I think it will be imperative to ask me the questions in order for me to jump into them, right? Um,
Absolutely. Absolutely. I appreciate you. So, what inspired you to run for office?
yes, that's a great question. And I think representation matters. You know, Burlington has been changing since the 80s, and I don't believe that in our history we had received anyone from foreign born in Africa or Asia to ever run for office here. So as a parent, university founder and manager, I thought it would be imperative to give people like me a voice, you know, in the city of Burlington. And I think what inspired me to run is the great work of rights and democracy that they do throughout the state. And I was fortunate enough to attend some of their trainings, you know, to for elected officials to gain understanding about the process and also being elected and also making policies for the betterment of the state and the city. But I thought it would be imperative for me to improve the communication between the city of Burlington and also my constituents, you know. And back then in 2017, we had one major issue that was to transform North Avenue from a 4-lane car to and add bike lanes. So I thought it would be imperative for me, with everything that is going on around the nation about climate change, to run for office and also to make sure that people that looks like me have representation. So reason why I run, and also one for the and being the only African at the council back then, and now we're fortunate to have two. Yes.
Congratulations. Thank you for that. So, did you feel as you were running for office, did you feel that your racial or ethnic identity played a role in how you described yourself as a candidate?
Yes, it played a role, but for me, it was a positive role because the residents of Burlington needed some type of change too, because where I represent, it was one of the most conservative wards in our city. And while knocking on doors and asking people, okay, what do they think? The first impression that I received, if people uh, needed some people of color, needed also younger generations to run for office. And those were the impression that I received. And I think only one time that I knock on a door, but that person chased me with like swears, you know, all type of swears to get out of his house. And then I just thought it's because of me as someone with accent, as also someone, a Black person. And those were my first impressions when I was running for office.
I'm sure we all have door knocking experiences of varying kinds like that. The dogs, all of those things. I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
So today we're really talking about hate crimes and harassment today, which is a difficult topic, right?
Yeah.
Can you share a story about your experience with either hate crimes or harassment in your political career that you felt were directly tied to your identity?
Absolutely. And I think it was only one time, and I was told that that person has some mental, you know, issues, mental problem going on. And he used to really send me direct messages addressed to me alone, you know, just talk, you know, swearing at my race, my accent, and all of that. But I think when he started to really talk about my family, meaning that this person has been doing research, knew where I work, knew where I live, knew how my wife and my children look like. And it's then that I decided then to take action in letting the safety institution in our city know that this is happening. And I think they proactively reached out to that person and they brought him to court. And you know, the court decided for that person to never ever contact me again. And so far, I mean, so good, because in one point, I believe Kiah, yep, you found some of his online rhetorics out there. You sent it to Shay. Shay told me, and I think when I sent it to the city, they definitely found him and also brought him to prison and court again because he breached the understanding that they had. Yes.
What impact did his constant harassment have on you or your family, or even the community that you represent, thinking about other new Americans who are seeing you on the dais? And
yeah, I mean, in one point I felt strongly that something needed to be done for my safety and also the safety of my children, my family. And I do believe that the consequences, I mean, it seems that that person wanted me to step down, which I refused to do. And, you know, it impacted also how I feel about in terms of safety. I could never walk or drive my car. And now I've been trying to pay attention to if anybody's following me, and also look at my window door, you know, from time to time, if I see a car parked, to make sure that it's not that person. And in one point, you know, it's starting to really affect me emotionally. And I requested for the city to at least find a police car and leave it on my street, which they did. And, you know, I thought that this person wanted me to quit, which I refused to do. And I also wanted to make sure that the people that I serve, the people that look like me, will not be fearful because I am experiencing this. And I wanted them to also be very strong and also just to be careful at the same time.
Absolutely. I mean, that's frightening, and I'm glad that you were able to get the support of your local law enforcement and everything, that they did step in. Yes. So you had mentioned some different tools and practices that you're using to try to protect yourself from harm. Do you do anything differently online? Are you utilizing anything? You don't have to share if you're using specific software or anything like that, but are there some things that you've now adjusted in how you think about safety because of that experience? Yeah.
I mean, I think because of that experience, that was the only experience really, to tell you the truth. And it stopped, but I think most of the time also we have sometimes a lot of disagreements between city councils and also sometimes between my constituents, you know, based on policies and also based on standpoints. But I don't typically use anything like in terms of software or anything, but I just want to be extra careful in the way that I communicate, and also try to understand a viewpoint before I make any judgment. You know, I did personally, I mean, did accuse of people of racism when it was not actually racism itself, you know, that I did. And just thinking about that system, a system can be racist most of the time. But me, I personally believe it's not the system itself, but it's the people who compose that system who sometimes make racial, you know, jokes or send you loaded words just to undermine who you are, undermine your identity. But I think I've been very strong through my life about just these type of things. And I just don't want these type of things to slow down people who want to get involved, and also people who want to make an impact in their communities, because it goes hands in hands. You cannot be successful without having people who are against. But the only problem is when they against you because of your identity, you know. And I am an open person, and I love people, but whoever makes those type of advances, I fight back. And the way that I fight back is I tell you what I think, and if it's trying to become physical, that's when I try to involve our law enforcement.
Thank you for that. Do you have any suggestions or words of encouragement for anyone that may be concerned or doesn't really know whether or not this is something that they feel they could take on.
Yeah, and I mean, I think I would just remember an African proverb that says, if you can walk, you definitely can dance. And if you can talk, you can sing. And whoever you are, if you are physically and mentally able to participate in the process of our democracy, nothing should undermine that, right? And during my also tenure, I mean, I think I have changed a little bit how the Burlington politics works. I mean, I think I inspired a lot of young people who look like me to run for office to get the interest. And I think I will continue to do that. But the only advice that I have for them is they need to be, they need to be free. They need to also hold themselves accountable, and they need to not have any fear in coming into the political arena, you know. And I will continue to just recruit people who are underrepresented in making sure that they part of the process, that they matter. Yeah.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. We got a request, if you wouldn't mind, for if you could type in, if you'd be willing to type in on the chat, or we can find it later, to share that proverb, because it's very beautiful. So thank you so much for that, Ali. I definitely appreciate you. Thank you very kindly. So next, I would love to hear from Representative Diana Gonzalez. Hello, Diana.
Hello, Kiah. And thank you all for being here today. It's really wonderful to be with you all in this virtual space and thinking about running for office. And my story about how I decided to run for office is that I had been doing union organizing and had always just thought unions were great. And then when I was union organizing, I experienced a lot of people who didn't think unions were great. And I felt very naive and was really thrown off completely about what I understood for colleagues. And so I had a 3-year effort at UVM, and we were partially successful. There's lots of ways to determine success. So I left that and left that job that I was doing and was on the lookout for what next. It was a very difficult disappointment that we weren't able to get across the finish line. And Emma, who is on the call right now, was looking around at the fact that we had an open seat and reached out to me. So I am like one of the many women of color who didn't think about elected politics until someone asked them to run. So when I think about this group of folks here, whether you're thinking about running or thinking about encouraging others to run, that really being asked is a very powerful and important piece of the puzzle. So pre-Trump, the research is very clear that most women need to be asked 5 times before considering to run, and people of color have even higher numbers of times before they need to get asked before they consider running. So it's very, very important that we look around people and ask them and invite them to run, invite them to think about themselves in these seats of power. So I was asked, and I thought, oh, I don't know, what is that? And Emma did a very skillful job in her initial recruiting of me and invited now Senator Chris Pearson to come along and said, here's the other dude that's running. And really just laid out really what a terrible choice that other person was. And I was like, anybody else running? They're like, nope, nobody else.
See you.
Exactly. And so I said, sure, I will run. Definitely had lots of fear and lots of identity-based fear of really imagining as a queer Latina woman. And 6 years ago, I did not feel young, but in comparison to our electeds at the state level, it definitely was on the younger end. Now our state house is actually skewed even younger than it was at that time. So it was, I felt very daunted by the prospect that so even though post-Trump, the rhetoric and the harassment and the hate crimes have really ramped up. Even before that, just really carrying the legacy of people like me will subject themselves to violence if we choose to run, if we choose to put ourselves out into the spotlight. And as I was considering it, really thinking about this choice, I happened to be listening to an immigrant activist, and she said that people ask her, I've lost her name unfortunately, but people ask her, how could she go into the front line? How could she do these protests, these nonviolent protests of, isn't she putting herself at physical jeopardy? Isn't she risking her life as she's doing these nonviolent protests? And she says, people that look like me are subjected to violence every day, no matter what we do. So I might as well do something that pushes my community forward, that makes it possible for us to have more justice in the world. And so that reframe of really looking at how it is not the choice to be public that invites violence. It is the fact that we have violence put upon us as women of color, as queer people, regardless of what we do. And so stepping into positions of power allow us the opportunity to make change, allow us to have other people see that they can also come along and be part of that change. And so that was very inspiring for me. When I have not been the target of harassment of either by one person in a systematic way or big moments of violence. So for that, I feel very fortunate. And there is the constant larger pressure that is out there. That is the question that will, something could crop up. And so in that, it is absolutely conversations that I have with my partner, and that was the lead up to running of what are the things that we're going to put into place to both do what we can to put ourselves into a position to keep things secure, that we are able, but really that emotional security is a more I was going to say tangible, but it's intangible, but a more within your grasp, at least within our family's grasp, of what is it that we need to think of, what are the things that we can support ourselves emotionally in order to do this work of being public and being present. And so nothing hard tangible in terms of here's the software that I use in that way, but the very small things, that knowing to do the small kind of structural things in order to then have that emotional space to do it. Of, I have a Google Voice number that is the phone number that I use. I have a PO box. And so those small structural things, I have a separate email that I use those things. So and we're going to hear today from an expert on these different ways that you can put in systems and checks to create some of your physical safety. But that really, for me, the biggest thing, and for my family, the biggest thing is, what is the reason for doing this? What is the emotional support that we're giving ourselves for the reason that we're doing this? Because it's a family decision. It's not an individual decision when someone chooses to run. And so in that, it's a family discussion about how we want to be. And I encourage folks to think about that for yourselves when you're thinking about running or encouraging people to run.
Oh, thank you, Deanna. Now, so I feel very fortunate that we had the opportunity to serve together. And so you saw a lot that went on beyond even just my story. And I think of some really challenging moments that happened at the State House even. I think about when there was the bill signing for much of the gun legislation that happened in 2017 and 18. And at that time, the threats that were literally happening on those days, and knowing that many of those types of protests have continued and are always kind of lying in wait, as well as things that are happening within your communities as well. So, I mean, because Winooski itself is pretty unique when we think about Vermont's narrative of being, the second whitest in the nation. Tell us a little bit more about that. I mean, and how that, like what that looks and feels like for yourself of being in these spaces where you're seeing You're seeing that verbal violence, you're seeing that intimidation, you're seeing that happening around you, and you're representing a community of that has the composition that you have.
Yeah, so for those of you that don't know, Winooski is the most ethnically diverse municipality in Vermont. And so in that, I feel very fortunate to live here, period. And then I feel very fortunate to be a person of color representing my community. And so it's pretty amazing in that way. It's also pretty amazing that there are 2 people of color. We're a 2-seat district in Winooski, and we're Winooski and a bit of Burlington, to be specific in the district, and that we're both people of color. I feel very, very fortunate for both of those. And in that, part of the responsibility that I feel is to not only move legislation forward that protects us and protects my community, but then really speaking as much as possible in the spaces around how can we keep a lens for people of color, how can we make sure that we're including everyone when we're writing legislation and not excluding people because we have a framework that generally excludes people of color. And so those are 2 things that I really think about. In terms of the verbal violence that has come up in the State House around different bills, that again, I really go to what is my psychic protection in that, and that I think about that particular woman's story a lot. I think about Audre Lorde's quotes a lot. What's the grounding of all of the women of color that have come before me or that are putting themselves in much more precarious situations in order to be leaders for their community, that gives me protection against the fear and anger that are coming at me and at us collectively. And so those are some of the things that I do.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I really appreciate that. Thank you. So next, we'd love to hear from Emily Kornheiser. Emily.
Thank you. And Deanna, so much of what you said resonated so deeply. I really appreciate hearing it. Thank you. So I ran for office because I'm still in my first term, nearing the end of my second year. And I ran for office because I wanted to be well represented. I had been aware for a long time through various work and relationships that I'd had in my community that the bucolic New England image of everyone taking care of each other and everyone having their needs met and everyone getting along, and especially down in Brattleboro, where there's a lot of comfort with liberal ideas, but not really as much living of those ideals sometimes. And so was really aware of the full diversity of my community and the full needs of my community, and really wanted representation for my community that was able to hold all of those stories. I'm a Jewish woman from New York. I moved to Vermont more than 20 years ago. I don't know how to say I'm a Jewish woman from New York without saying I moved to Vermont more than 20 years ago. The 2 always go together. And I just realized that now, that there's always a need here to qualify that I might not be from here, but I like kind of get it now, and I sort of belong, and maybe you should accept me. And so that piece is sort of one of the threads that really winds its way through what it meant to come into politics in Brattleboro. And so my family has a really like a deep, strong Holocaust memory that I was very much raised with. And so the sense that there's like always someone coming for me at any minute is very, it's very present. It's just sort of like, it's the story I was raised with, and it's there whether or not I can tell myself that like there is safety in my life now. Jews have been, a lot of Jews, a lot of white Jews have been passing in the US for about 60 years now. And I have certainly been able to have that privilege. And so my story is one of this mix between being like very hyper aware of my otherness while many other people are not aware of my otherness, and like constantly balancing between those 2 things. So when I think about how I've described myself as a candidate, when I was doing early candidate trainings, I think one of the most important ways we can show up in politics is through an authentic voice that we're bringing, telling authentic stories of our community, really representing. And I think the only way to do that in a trustworthy way is by being fully yourself in that moment. And all of the candidate trainings were about really like proving your quals as a New Englander, which I can't do, and no one's gonna fall for it if I try. When being on video, not talking with your hands, also clearly not possible. I recently saw this like little tweet about someone like taping Bernie's iPad to a pillow so he could like do a video chat with Cardi B because he like couldn't hold the iPad because he had to move his hands while I was talking so much. So that felt nice to have that kind of representation. That's been floating around the media lately. So throughout the process of sort of getting trained as an ideal female candidate, I became more and more aware that I wasn't fitting the mold, even though I didn't quite understand it leading up, because I was running from this place of like multiple stories. And my confidence as a Jewish woman, like really raised in a strong matriarchy, meant that I didn't need to be asked 5 times or 6 times. I felt like I was raised to have a right to my voice, a right to my opinion, to like argue at the table until like morning comes. And so even that narrative about like women need to be asked 5 times, which is repeated all the time, and I think is really, really true for many women, wasn't true for me, because I felt like I had a right to be in the space. And through my time campaigning and being trained to campaign, and then in the State House, realizing how many people don't think I have a right to my voice. And that's been a really sort of interesting balancing act for me. Anti-Semitism in Vermont is real, and it's subtle, and it surprised me because it's not something that I grew up around much. There were definitely places that we like talked about the Jews didn't go, but it was never clear if it was like because it was dangerous or if it was like mayonnaise and just like a thing you don't do. And so coming into that as a more real experience in Vermont, like the wood guy sort of sexually fetishizing me as a Jewess and like, you know, while I was home alone, or there's a very cute child playing in the grass right behind you, Kiah. Or in the gun debate, the whole slogan of "Don't New York my gun rights," for me, like I immediately experience and hear Jewish overtones with that. And then I realize that other people don't. And I wonder, like, am I the one who's like misunderstanding the situation? Do the people who are saying that even understand what they're saying? Like how much of it is gaslighting myself? How much of it's real? It's sort of like a constant story there. I've had a little bit more harassment, and I've been sort of pinned as someone who might be part of a cabal, a secret cabal, which for the other people involved in the conversation is just like its own thing. But for me, secret cabal is like, it's a very anti-Semitic term for me, and it like brings up a lot of fear. Excuse me. And then I remind myself that like, I have been safe and I am safe. And I think back to those tools that I've developed since the beginning of this process. And some of them are my shields, and some of them are why I'm doing this. And some of them is that like, I have a dog that is like really big and scary, and he makes an enormous amount of noise if anyone comes near my door. Like Deanna, I have a phone number that's my landline, and the only people who call is constituents and my mother. So I'm always like bracing myself when the phone rings, and that's okay. And so those are like really the tools that I have in place, is like keeping things separate so I know I'm emotionally prepared before I enter that space. And reminding myself that like, some of this is a story and some of it's real, and that's okay to be constantly moving between those two things.
Thank you. It's not easy to share this. I hope you all are feeling that this is difficult, it's painful. There's historical traumas that are built into this that we're carrying into the work that we're doing. Can
I say one more thing? I had actually no
Please.
idea that this was going to be hard for me to talk about until I started talking about it. So thank you for that. And for your patience while I sort of struggled with it. One thing that's also
been very real for me in the State House is that we have a Capitol Police Department who's like separate from the Montpelier Police Department. And I had a personal issue about my safety that had nothing to do with my Jewishness when I was entering the State House that I had a conversation with them about, and they were so incredibly responsive to me in that moment that when sort of smaller things have come up in the meantime, I felt a lot of trust for them as I was dealing with that. And so that was really reassuring to me, because trying to explain all of this to my local police department sounds very complicated, to say the least.
Yeah, and I appreciate you being frank about that, because that is the challenge, especially as we're talking about New England, rural states, smaller communities where they may not have the awareness training or capacity to really think about how to deal with these kind of complex potential threats that may be coming to individuals, or where to take them, to track them, to even document them. I will bring into this, just so that you know before I forget, folks, something that I do recommend if you are, as a candidate, going to step into that space, it might be worth it to get a lawyer on retainer, just so that as you are going through different experiences, you have someone to talk to about them. What are your rights? What are not your rights? You don't always know and aren't always clear. You're collecting a sort of dossier to be able to have something, should there be a need to reflect on, because so much of what we do as persons that are constantly dealing with harassment as part of our everyday lives is that we will minimize things that we probably shouldn't. We'll ignore patterns that we probably shouldn't. We may even, nobody wants to live in that space of fear constantly, right? So sometimes it's good to have somebody else sort of hold that for you should you need it down the road. So I really appreciate you sharing your story so much, Emily. Thank you. I do appreciate you, and we will definitely come back to talking to more folks in a minute. So now I would love to welcome to the conversation Rutland City Council Alderwoman Lisa Ryan. So excited to have you here. Thank you so much.
Hi, Kat.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm going to actually follow Ali's format and ask you to
Yes.
use questions.
Absolutely. That would be for sure, for sure. I'm having a little trouble hearing you, and I know that may be hard because just different spaces that we're in, and I don't really have volume control. So my tech people, if there's anything that we can add, that'd be great. Well, tell me, Lisa, what inspired you to run for office?
Well, I have never really been into politics previously in my life. I really kind of wanted nothing to do with them. But I was approached by a group of individuals, and one of them who was kind of really involved in getting me to run was Melinda Humphrey, who is on this call, and she's also an alderwoman. So she asked me in, late fall of 2016, and I did not give her a straight answer right away. I really had to think about it. I really didn't know what I was getting into. But ultimately, I decided that, you know what, why not? I had returned from college in 2011. Rutland had changed in ways that I, wasn't used to from growing up here. And I just really didn't like all the things that were happening. So I said, well, maybe this will be a really good opportunity to get involved in a positive way.
Thank you. So did you find that, did your racial or ethnic identity play a role in how you described yourself as a candidate when you were running?
I mean, not really, not for me. And I was extremely, extremely worried about that running. Growing up in a community, I didn't want people to think that I was running just because I was Black. So that was really always on my mind. I did want to bring diversity to the board and to the Rutland community. And I, as a young African-American woman, I did want to do that, but I can't fully say that race was totally involved, but it was definitely part of it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So since we are talking about the topic that we're talking about, we're thinking about hate crimes, we're thinking about harassment that is definitely tied back to our identities, who we are and how we show up as people. Can you share a story about your experience with either that you've experienced in your political career?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple of situations. You know, my first year, so I ran in 2017, and it's a 2-year term, and then I was reelected in 2019. My first couple years, I was kind of really silent. I just kind of listened. I learned a lot, learned the ins and outs of you know, city government. And then I started to be more vocal, I would say, towards the end of my first term and into my second term. You know, there was something specific that you know, I'm still dealing with. It's still very traumatic for me, and that happened about 8 months ago when a racist meme was posted by a local older person who I sit with on the board currently and did in the past. And it was about white privilege. There was a lot of publicity on it. I mean, folks can look it up if they want details. I'm not going to get into super details, but I will say how much it affected me. I was not the person to send it to the media. I actually wanted to stay far away from that because I knew in my heart I would somehow get blamed for it, for reporting and for all of the things that come with that. But again, being the only person of color on the board, I certainly got blamed for it from, I would say, you know, we're talking about trolling and the trolls of the person who posted it and saying, I mean, there were terrible things said about me. I was being harassed. I was accused of being racist. It was a big deal to me. And it's something that I'm still kind of working on as getting past it, and, you know, still having to sit with this person on the board for another year.
Wow, I'm truly sorry. It's like when you step up to serve, that's not supposed to be part of it. Political discourse is one thing, disagreements on policy is another.
Right.
But attacking a person's hood, attacking their, it's never acceptable.
Yeah, it was really devastating.
So you said that this has been hard. This has been something that you've been dealing with for almost a year now. On trying to find your way through. What impacts do you feel like this has had on yourself, your family, your broader community?
You know, I've suffered emotionally, psychologically, physically. I have my relationship with my husband and my family, and everything's kind of, it changed at the time significantly. I didn't trust anyone. I wasn't comfortable physically being in chambers with the people that I was serving the community with. I just wasn't comfortable. I didn't feel safe. I became paranoid. You know, I was having horrible things said about me on Facebook that were just so irrelevant, and I don't know where they came from. I was devastated, and it's taken me a long time to get my life back on track.
Wow, thank you. Again, I'm so sorry. So there's still this has happened out there, but there's been no real resolution.
Yeah, I mean, the resolution was you know, a fight, really, and it was a fight to get you know, anti-bias and anti-racist training implemented into city government, which took months and months, and it finally happened in February. But, you know, it wasn't mandatory. It's like, if you want to come. It was put out to all department heads. It wasn't open to the public. We had great trainers. Kiah and Sue were wonderful. But it took a really long time to get to that place. And even when I was in that space, like, I didn't want to go to it. I did not want to go, but I knew I had to, because if I didn't, what were people going to say? Like, that was my biggest concern. Mm-hmm. So I went, and I was pretty silent. I was scared. I had actually spoken to the police before attending, letting them know of my safety concerns to be in this space with people who I thought were my allies, and weren't and aren't. So, you know, asking the mayor to put in anti-bias training into the budget was a fight. I met with him one-on-one. It was a very civil conversation, and it was a flat out, I have no interest in doing that. And, you know, down the road a little bit, all it took was a white male to approach him and ask him, and all of a sudden it's in there.
Wow. I'm truly sorry. Well, so I guess I want to ask this. So what words of encouragement or recommendations do you have for others who may be considering running? I mean, we've heard some harrowing stories from everyone here today, I think, in their own way, that no one should have to experience on any level. Other thoughts that you might have for other racial ethnic minorities who are thinking about stepping into the ring?
Yeah, I think someone else had said it, but, you know, understand that this is a huge time commitment. The work is rewarding, but it is incredibly stressful, especially as a minority. And to get allies, like, make sure you have some allies, and make sure you build those relationships with people. You know, there's 11 people on the Board of Aldermen in Rutland City, including myself. And out of the other 10, one person was stuck by me through this whole thing, checked in on me, came over when I was hysterical. Like, one person was there for me on the board. And then, you know, another thing is just, like, commit and be with people who care about you. You know, Tabitha, Kiah, you have been wonderful in helping me navigate through this. Know who your allies are, and also, like, get the support from your family. And, you know, my husband is white, and he, you know, I don't think he understood, like, fully everything that was happening until it came to, like, a real point. And then he got it, and he was like, wow, this is actually crazy. So know your allies, build those relationships. Therapy's awesome. It works, you know, to be totally transparent. Just take care of yourself.
Definitely. Thank you for that, Lisa. Thank you so much. I appreciate everyone bringing family into this, and I'll try to add that back for us to talk a little bit more after Jessica's presentation. I mean, there is a recognition that we think about our families, we may think about our immediate families, our spouses, our partners, our children, but then there's ripple effects as well. One of the things I've spoke about many times when I went to visit Central America, for example, and met with the mother of a slain activist who was murdered in front of her mother's house, they understood my story and my experience, because they, as a mom, she raised her daughter to do the very things she was doing and to fight in the ways that she was, not with the expectation that she might be at risk. And so our families are carrying that weight as well of worrying about us in these worlds and in these spheres. And so I think that that's why it's really excellent that we're able to have Jessica here to share with us her great wisdom and knowledge, to ways to think about this and ways for us to be a little bit safer and consider things we might want to consider, especially in this time as we're all online right now. And even basic things that I might do as security measures of covering up my camera, it's open all the time because I'm constantly online doing video calls. These are the types of things that small steps as well as big considerations may need to be brought to bear. And we'll want to also come back to the question of, so what would we need? So if there's something that we can ask for as a new candidate from our communities and our campaign teams, what are those things that we would need to ensure that we're safe and ensure that our children don't have to worry about us in that way too. So thank you so much. I would love to welcome, we're going to take a second to shift over and go to a PowerPoint presentation with Jessica Robinson. Thank you so much, Jessica, for joining us. Really excited.
Yes, thank you so much. It's so wonderful to be here. It's incredible to hear everyone's story. It's so powerful and also so different. And it's really great to see representation from all of these different angles, and it really helps to really color the lens of why this conversation is so important tonight. So Kiah, thank you so much for having me here. It's just an honor to be with all of you tonight. So thank you. The presentation is coming up momentarily.
My son still asks me for help. Just one moment. I appreciate you. We're going to get started. I am pulling it up as well. Okay. Let me go ahead and I can share the screen. I got it. So I think that will work. We have our security, you'll be very happy to know, Jessica, that we have our security system in place in a way that we can't have participants other than hosts running the call right now. So just let me know when you need us to click and we will, I will advance. So Thank you, please go right ahead.
Okay, all right, no, that sounds great. And thank you so much, I so appreciate it. So as mentioned, it really is so powerful to hear these stories and these narratives tonight. And I think it really just sets a wonderful tone for the conversation that we're going to have next, which it really is very practical, but I also hope that you take some meaning away from it as well, that you could also say, hey, these are some things that I could also implement into my life in real time, even starting tonight, if you need to. Next. Go, oh, yeah, next, yeah, thank you. So, we heard a lot tonight about what really is going on in the political lives of people that are representing us. And sometimes we know about it, sometimes that we don't. But these are real things, whether it's trolling or it's some sort of attack, whether it's online or it's in person, whether it's stalking, it's hacking, it's some form of harassment. And of course, cyberbullying, which is becoming more and more, I would say, visible. And I think when we think about cyberbullying, I think a lot of times you think of it in terms of what goes on with teenagers. The truth of the matter is that this also would describe what happens to adults online as well. And I think that what we've heard tonight also clearly illustrates that, and also the stories of other political candidates as well. So. Next. And so when we have these things happen in our life, it's, particularly when it's so visible, with all of you, it can feel challenging in so many ways, whether it's hurt or grief or feeling some form of terror in some way. These are very real feelings. And so part of what I do in working with clients as a cybersecurity expert with a different approach is really taking a holistic perspective and really thinking, okay, what does it really mean to live a consciously secure life? And if I'm working with someone around how do we really support these individuals in thinking holistically about their life, you can't forget about the emotions and what makes someone human. And you can't forget about their ability to be able to sleep at night, or their ability to just be able to feel comfortable driving in their car. And so what I think was obviously very clear tonight were these such powerful stories that really illustrated this as well. So next. So so where do we go next? I mean, where do we go from here? And there is a way to really think about, how do I remain safe online? How do I remain safe in person? How do I remain safe with my family and just personally, individually? And we'll talk about that today as well. So, next. There are basic truths that I've come to learn in doing this type of work and working with individuals and working in security itself for about 15 years now. And one of them is, if someone wants to cause harm to you, then they will. I mean, they'll try and they'll try again and they'll try again and they'll try again. And we see this with hackers all the time. Hackers will create some type of malware and they'll just be very patient and they'll allow the malware to sit in a system until they can get the information that they need in order to actually do the hack into the system or the software that they want to do, they want to go into. And so, you know, we can't control everything, but we do want to control what we can control. And we want as much as possible, and I would want for all of you as much as possible to be able to feel as comfortable and as confident and as in control of what you can control as possible. So next. So, could you go back one? Oh yes. So, and that was it. Thank you. Next, thank you. At the end of the day, really helping people to feel a sense of inner calm, a sense of inner confidence, sense of trust within themselves, the people that they're working with, a sense of empowerment and feeling enabled is really part of me, I would say, the outcome within our work. And I say that because it's important, I think, for anyone who wants to reach their full potential. We can talk about all the security things that you can implement in your business or in your personal life. But the truth is I do find, and I think it was also really clearly illustrated tonight, that really a strong sense of security comes from within yourself. And so helping people to achieve this is really a huge piece of success, of being secure. Next. So part of this integration is also thinking about, so what does it really mean to live a consciously secure life when you're taking and looking at the personal aspect of security, the work aspects of security, and then also the online aspects of security. Then the fact that technology cuts across all three of these areas. And so when we think about that and we think about how we are living life today, and not just the speed of technology over the past 5 years, but even now, just over the speed of the last 4 weeks of where we are with technology and where children in this country are with technology, we can really get even a clearer grasp of where we will be in 10 years at the end of this decade. Next. So the first thing that I'm going to offer for tonight is, and there's going to be 3 in total, we have 9 guideposts for creating a consciously secure life. And they include this interdisciplinary approach of emotional, psychological, spiritual, and of course, physical and technical or digital security. And the first one tonight is setting boundaries, and it's protecting your space. Next. And so when we think about what it means to be safer online, we do want to make sure that we're thinking about how do we protect the online space. And it can be different for anyone depending on the type of applications that you're using, what your habits are, how often you're online, where you're connecting online. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that now. Thinking about your privacy settings, your security settings on any application that you're using is extremely important. Making sure that you have 2-factor or multi-factor authentication enabled is absolutely critical. And thinking about this for all applications, but also, of course, including your social media accounts. And it doesn't matter what you're using, they have some sort of enablement of security on them. And so putting them on whatever settings that are most important to you. But in many cases, what I would say also the strongest settings I think would be really important in thinking about wanting to feel safe and also wanting to kind of really protect yourself, but also protect your privacy and your information, which can be challenging at times if you're a political candidate where everything is kind of out in the open. But enabling these controls can help you to feel safer. The other thing is thinking about how to prevent hacks. These are things that in being out in the public and really kind of interfacing, it kind of puts you front and center. That doesn't mean that people have the right to take advantage of that and your personal information as well, or to attack you online. And so sometimes in these cases, though, people can try to take advantage and want to hack. So ways to prevent this is really thinking about passwords and passcodes. So whether it's Facebook accounts or other social media, other apps like Box or Dropbox, anything that you happen to be using, Slack, really thinking about the type of passwords that you're using, thinking about the character length of the password. I always recommend at least 8, if not 12. At this point, all the 6-digit passwords have already been hacked, so and 8 digits will probably be hacked by the end of this year. So really thinking long-term and having long passwords is really important. I do think by the end of this decade, we'll be in, most of our systems will be passwordless, which would be exciting because there's still so much vulnerability with passwords themselves. And then, of course, making these passcodes and passwords alphanumeric, so meaning having letters, numbers, symbols, and the like. So if you are hacked, you do want to make sure that you go in and you do a couple of the things that I've already said and stated in the previous comments, but also really make sure that you are updating your password, identifying any data that's been exposed, informing your connections, reporting the hack to the company. And that one could be a tough one. I know that people in the past who are visibly public, and people that I've worked with have said, oh, well, it doesn't matter if you report anything to the company, let's say Twitter, because they're not going to do anything. But they have gotten to a point now where they are paying a lot more attention to this. If there is harassment going on online, they are paying more attention. I have no doubt that they're documenting this more, particularly because they've gotten a lot of negative attention for how particularly this has impacted women and their slow response to supporting women. So you documenting this, kind of like going to law enforcement and documenting it, whether they respond or not, if you are at least documenting it, that will support you, particularly in the future as any type of harassment online continues. So, and then I wanted to just add a tool in here as well. A tool here called I Have Been Pawned, which is a place that you can go to put in a password that you may have to see if your password's been hacked. And that could just be a way for you to know if you've actually been hacked in the past. Sometimes people don't know, but that's a way for you to find out if you have. And then the next is cyberbullying. And with cyberbullying, this is really those attacks that happen online, these trolls, people acting and like they're anonymous, and sometimes maybe not anonymous, and just kind of putting themselves out there, not trying to hide. And if this is happening, you do want to make sure that you take an image. So take a picture of it. You want to make sure that you're documenting it. It's absolutely critical that you document everything. If it's, the old adage, of course, in securities, if you didn't document it, it didn't happen. So having all of that documentation is absolutely critical. And then blocking people just for your own sanity and, for your own support is a good thing to do. And then again, report it as well. And that too, you documenting that you're reporting it to a particular online platform, and then reporting it to law enforcement if it's escalating to that point. All of that could help you in the future. So next. So a couple of tools that I wanted to make sure to share with you guys and that you guys are using and thinking about is secure messaging. So there's WhatsApp and Signal. You may have heard of these things, but you may or may not be using them on a regular basis. WhatsApp is much more popular. Signal is a tool that is encrypted like WhatsApp and not so popular, but really great and used by a lot of activists around the world. Particularly activists that truly are in the public eye and are very concerned about their personal safety. VPN is something that's next. So when you think about your connection to Wi-Fi and securing your connection to Wi-Fi, I'm sure you're familiar with what a virtual private network is. It's probably have this related to work, and they probably set this up for you there, but you can also have this at home. So if you're not on a work device at home, you could get and I have a couple listed here, you can get a VPN that you can set up in your home. And there's a couple listed here that are free, but you can also get something like ExpressVPN and CyberGhost, which cost just, they have a subscription, I believe, for 6 months. I believe it's close to $60 or something like that. But just great tools to be able to use to keep your information safe. and to keep your connection to the internet safe. The next thing is a password manager. If you're like a lot of people, you have probably over 200 passwords on some level, or 200 different tools that you're probably using, whether you're using them all at once or not. They could be something to do with your child or your husband or your wife or a significant other, and then they could have other tools that you're using that relate to your siblings or your parents or other friends, and then you have all of your own tools that you're using on a regular basis. So it's just not possible to keep up with everything now. But having a password manager, a tool that can not only help you keep your passwords safe, but also set those password limits for you is really great and really important to do. All right, next, let's see. I thought I saw a question pop up, so I just want to take a quick look at the chat and just answer questions in real time. Is it possible for the tools offered to be sent in a follow-up email? Oh, yes. Yeah, we can make sure you have that in a follow-up email for sure. Okay. All right. Next slide. All right. So the second thing is practice situational awareness. So staying informed on practical dangers. So next slide. So when thinking about your personal security, one of the things that you want to be thinking about kind of at all times is having some sort of personal security plan. And you might be thinking that that seems really formalized, but having something like this in place is always a great thing to do. The things that we're talking about right now technically is a plan for you. It just may not be formalized. But thinking about that and thinking about that in all areas of your life and how that impacts your family is always a great thing to do. Particularly if there are threats involved. As a security person, whenever there's a threat, it's fully documented and from different vantage points. And when it comes to your personal security, it should be the same way. Really taking the time to write it down and really making sure that there's a plan in place to ensure that something like this doesn't happen again. It's the same thing if you happen to have something go wrong with one of your bank accounts, or you find out that someone somehow got a hold of some personal information of yours. Really thinking about how to mitigate that from happening again. Thinking about any home or office security system. So if you were to have someone that comes to your office or your home with malicious intent, they try to either break into your house, they try to take something from your house, they try to harass you in some way. Being able to really record all of that happening just goes back to documentation. And I would also like to think that even if you don't have anything like that going on now, or if you're someone who's thinking about running for office and you're thinking, wow, this is a lot, and I have an apartment, I don't own my house, or I don't have a house. Just thinking about things like this can just be good to do and good to think about, because it goes back to documentation if you do happen to have something that occurs that could be captured on video. And then thinking about your portable devices. So whether it's your phone, your iPad, your laptop, there are times where we walk away to go to the bathroom and we leave them on a desk. We're in our home and, let's say we're in a home or we're at a park and we just walk away, or we look away for even just a few seconds and we leave our phone or our laptop out. If you don't lock it, meaning you don't have some sort of passcode on it that can lock and secure your laptop, then anyone could grab it and have access to the data there. So really ensuring that you are securing your devices is really important, just for your own sanity, but also just to be able to protect the information that you have. So next. So the third thing I would say of these 9 guideposts of living a consciously secure life, and of course we couldn't cover everything today, and but just really wanted to give you kind of just some high-level things that you could definitely do and implement today. Is the third thing is create revolutionary partnerships. And I'm talking partner with people that truly get you and that really make you and your security a priority. Next. So you all, whether you are currently in office or you're interested in running for office, you are such an incredible position to be able to set precedent. And I know that this is already happening because of all the things that you've said, but a lot of times, and I believe Kiah said this earlier, when we're talking about law enforcement and some of the things that they're slow to respond to certain things, or they say something is, they can't arrest someone for something, or they can't even write a report for something. A lot of times it's possible that there are laws that are lagging. And so their view of harassment doesn't include online harassment. All of these things, I would imagine, and you would know more than me, but it's possible that have in your roles or working with people that are in different levels of government could possibly change this and expand some of the laws or regulations or statutes that are in place to really help bring a lot of our outdated laws that are across the country and frankly across the world that are outdated. There are so many people that I've worked with where they've been cyberbullied, or I even know people that have had some sort of revenge porn that has taken place. And if you don't know what that is, that's, let's say if you're in a relationship with someone and there's an image or some intimate, something intimate that that a former partner has, and they somehow make this image or make this information public. So they're now somehow taking revenge. And there are a lot of people that have been really harmed by this, that really amazing people that have, gone on to do something with publicly with their career. And all of a sudden someone's coming out with some information about them that really is quite normal, and it really wouldn't be a big deal at all, except now this person is more visible. And so really helping for the laws to catch up here is absolutely critical. And I think this relates to hate crimes as well, is really ensuring that it represents the technical speed at which our society is moving at, I think is critical. But again, I have no doubt that you all are on top of this, but the ability in terms of creating these revolutionary partnerships and being able to do this, not just across one state within Vermont or Rhode Island, but also be able to do this across states, across the country, and national legislation, I think is just such a powerful time for this. Making security an investment is also something to think about. And when I say that, I actually do mean if you're running for office, you're thinking about running for office, or you're in office, then think about security and cybersecurity as an actual investment. Do you actually have something in your budget set aside for it? We live in a different world than we did even 5 years ago. Thinking about a budget, it doesn't matter if it's even $1,000, but something that could really say and show that this is something that you're also committed to and you're willing to set aside something in the budget for it, I do think is important. The next thing is have the right partner. So if you do decide, hey, I have some concerns and I do want to make sure that that I'm working with someone, or I'm concerned about possibly running, do consult with someone. It was mentioned to partner with a lawyer. You should also partner with a security consultant or someone who can really help you think about the different things that you should be considering when running. And this is important because we all could remember what happened with Hillary Clinton's campaign and the hack that took place there. I mean, at the end of the day, no one wants to have that be a mark on their campaign when they're running. So we're just in a different time. So actively thinking about these things is just part of, again, having that security plan, but it really is what it means, I think, to just be a leader in 2020. So last thing is you also want to bring your family along. We can't forget about family, and it's just so incredibly important. Obviously the impact, and many of you stated it tonight, that they play in your support in running for office, and staying and being motivated, but also what they're also may experience or what they may go through. And they are, whatever you're thinking about security, they should or would be part of that. So when you think about the security plan for yourself, what is their security plan? How are they varying their routes to and from school or to and from the office? What time are they going to be in on certain nights of the week to ensure that they are safe and they're checking in with you? Or how many times will they text you throughout the day? There's accountability that's involved in this. If you state that there's something that's wrong or something that you're concerned about, accountability for yourself, accountability for your family is really important. Part of having a right partner is someone that can help you to hold yourself and hold others around you accountable. But part of your role with your family would be also helping to hold them accountable to making sure that they're sticking to certain commitments that they've made to help ensure the security of the family. Next. I love this quote, and it came to me because it clearly represents all of you, and it's the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. And of course, this is Dr. Martin Luther King. And it seems to me that if, however you came to wanting to serve in public office, whether someone asked you or it was a calling within yourself, to me, that is what it is. And as scary as it is, and all of the legacy of leaders that have come before you, I just see you as part of that incredible group of individuals that are changing not only Vermont and Rhode Island, but the world. And it's exciting to see, and you become a part of history with the work that you're doing, and your courage to be able to move forward in this. And I know that I'm extremely inspired by hearing many of your stories, and also just knowing the people that are on the call that want to run for office and the calling that they must have had, however it came to them to run for office. And Kiah and her story, I just wanted to share that as just a thought that security should never be something that causes someone to want to back away. And to the point, there are times where, of course, it gets to the point where it's just absolutely insane, and you do have to stop. But if you're on the call and you want to run for office, just know that there are opportunities that you could take advantage of to be able to support you in this process. So, and obviously with this call, you know, you're not alone. Next. So just lastly, just if you would like to get in touch, or if there's any questions that you have, please just feel free to reach out. I'm always available, and I'm always happy to have a call to just talk with someone and answer specific questions. One of the things I've learned in this process is security is personal, and feeling safe is personal. And I want to make sure that you all feel supported and have everything that you need, along with all the other incredible leaders on this call. So thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's been such an honor. So thank you.
I'm muted.
Okay.
I'm muted me again. I'm unmuted. All right. Thank you so much, Jessica. I'm so grateful for everything that you brought to us today. I appreciate everyone on this call tonight. You all are amazing. Thank you so much for participating in this process. This has been fantastic. We are at our 9 o'clock hour, and I am trying to honor people's downtime. So if you have questions here in the chat, I know I have a few questions that are written down. Please feel free to send those along. The email that you got, the confirmation email, came from me, and you can respond back straight to that one. And if you have any other additional questions you'd like to ask, and we can get further through this. But this has been incredible. And so thank you so much to all of our presenters. Woo! And everyone for sharing your stories and being vulnerable. Thank you so much. And let us know if you would like to run for office, radvt.org. Thank you all. Have a wonderful evening.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.